Christmas Eve at my husband's family home was always the same glittering lights, a perfectly decorated tree, an endless buffet of catered food, and the quiet knowledge that no matter how much I tried my daughter, and I never truly belonged. 11 years of sitting through these holidays had taught me to smile politely, to ignore the comments hidden behind compliments, to accept being treated like a guest in a family that never felt like mine. But this year was different. This year, something happened that carved itself into my chest like a wound I'll never forget. I'm a 34-year-old mother married to Eli, a man who has always been gentle, steady, and reluctant to fight. Our daughter Lena is 9, bright-eyed, sensitive, the kind of child who notices everything but rarely speaks her hurt aloud. I've always admired her quiet resilience, though I sometimes wish she didn't need to be so resilient at such a young age. That night at the Morgan house, the rooms sparkled with expensive decorations. The tree towered in the living room window like something pulled from a magazine spread. Garlands draped the banisters, candles flickered on every surface, and Christmas music floated above the murmur of conversation. My husband's mother, Deborah, drifted through the room like a queen surveying her court. She greeted me with her usual sting disguised as small talk. "You wore flats again this year. Comfort first, I suppose." I smiled politely as always, swallowing the sting because it wasn't worth a scene. Lena stood beside me, her curls tied back with a red bow, clutching the Christmas card she had spent 3 nights making. On it, she had drawn Deborah holding a tray of cookies, wrote "Merry Christmas, Grandma" in careful gold marker, and sprinkled glitter across the edges. She asked me almost shyly if she should give it before or after the presents. I told her to wait, because surely she'd have gifts to open too. We settled near the tree as Deborah clapped her hands. "Let's do presents before dessert. Kids first." The familiar ritual began. One by one, names were called: Connor, Emma, Ava, Tyler. Boxes were passed, ribbons torn, laughter filled the air. Even baby Lexi, barely 6 months old, received a plush toy wrapped in gold paper. The pile under the tree shrank, the paper piled up, and Lena still sat waiting, her small card folded neatly in her lap. I counted the gifts as they dwindled: 4 left, 3 2. My chest tightened. I told myself there must be one tucked behind the tree, one mislabeled one Deborah had saved for last. But then she called Logan, a stepson from a cousin's remarriage, and handed him the final box. The pile was gone, and my daughter's name had never been called. Lena sat still, her hands folded, her smile forced and fragile. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why. She just looked down at her lap, fingers tracing the edges of her card, as if to remind herself it still mattered. My heart shattered. She was 9 years old, old enough to understand she'd been left out, but still too young to know how to demand an explanation. I wanted to scream, to stand up and call Deborah out in front of everyone, to ask how a grandmother could look her granddaughter in the eyes and deliberately ignore her. But before I could, I saw Eli. My husband, usually the calmest man in any room, the peacemaker, the one who avoided confrontation, was sitting rigid, jaw clenched, his eyes locked on our daughter. Then he stood up. The room hushed slightly, curiosity rippling across the relatives. He walked to the fireplace, reached behind one of the stockings, and pulled out a plain white envelope. Deborah narrowed her eyes, but Eli didn't look at her. He turned to Lena. "This," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the chatter, "was supposed to be opened last." He walked over and placed the envelope in her hands. Silence swept the room like a cold wind. For the first time that night, everyone's eyes were on Lena. Her hands trembled slightly as she tore the flap. Inside were 2 things: a short handwritten note and a small stack of folded papers. She opened the note first. "To my daughter Lena," she read softly, "for the girl who brings light wherever she goes. Let's chase the northern lights this year. Iceland awaits. Love, Dad." Gasps and murmurs rippled across the room. Deborah stiffened, her arms crossed tight. Walter, Eli's father, cleared his throat but said nothing. Lena unfolded the papers: 2 first-class tickets, 1 adult and 1 child, departing from Chicago to Reykjavik. Her eyes lit up brighter than the Christmas lights strung across the room. She looked up at Eli, her voice breaking with wonder. "We're really going!" He knelt to her level, his smile steady. "We are. you and me. The northern lights, hot cocoa snowmobiles, everything you dreamed of. She threw her arms around his neck, and for the first time that night, she didn't have to pretend she was fine. She didn't have to smile politely through hurt. She was seen, chosen, cherished in front of every single person who had overlooked her. Tears burned my eyes, but I let them fall. I wanted her to see them, to know that this moment mattered more than anything else. It wasn't just a gift, it was a declaration. She was not invisible. Across the room, Deborah smoothed a scrap of wrapping paper on her lap as though it mattered more than what had just unfolded. Her lips pressed into a thin, irritated line, her silence louder than any protest. Melissa, Eli's sister, offered a weak smile and said, "That's incredible, Eli." But no one else dared to speak. That night, Lena clutched the envelope in one hand and the card she had made for Deborah in the other. She never gave it. She never mentioned the missing gift. She simply held on to what truly mattered, the knowledge that her father had chosen her not just with a plane ticket, but with a love too strong to be ignored. And for the first time in years, I didn't care what Deborah thought. She had made her choice, and so had we. When we got home that night, Lena carried the envelope into her bedroom like it was a crown jewel. She tucked it under her pillow and whispered something to her bunny plush before closing the door. I lingered in the hallway, listening to her humming softly, and I realized she hadn't hummed in weeks. Not since she overheard her grandmother once again praising her cousins while ignoring her name entirely. Eli came up behind me and rested a hand on my shoulder. "She needed that," he said quietly. His voice was heavy, almost rough, but steady. I turned to him, my heart still burning with equal parts pride and sorrow. "Why did you wait until now? Why didn't you tell me you planned this?" He sighed, running his hand through his hair. "Because I wanted it to be undeniable. I wanted every single one of them to see her, to know she matters more than their silence. If I had told you earlier, you would have begged me to avoid making a scene." He was right. I had spent years keeping the peace, softening edges, telling myself that enduring subtle cruelty was easier than confrontation. But tonight had shattered that illusion. My daughter's pain was too raw, too visible. For the first time, I saw Eli's anger, not the fiery kind, but the deep, steady rage of a man pushed too far. And I realized I wasn't the only one who had noticed the years of exclusion. He had seen every look, every forgotten invitation, every missing gift. He had carried it in silence until the moment he couldn't anymore. The following morning, Lena bounded into the kitchen holding the envelope high. "Mommy, when are we going? When can I see the lights?" Her joy was radiant, and I wanted to bask in it. But I also saw the shadow flicker in her eyes when she asked, "Do you think Grandma forgot me on purpose?" My throat tightened. I knelt beside her, cupping her small hands in mine. "Sometimes people make choices that hurt others, but that's not about you, that's about them. You are unforgettable, Lena. Don't ever doubt that." She nodded, trying to believe me, but I could see the doubt linger. She was only 9, but she understood far more than she should have. Later that day, Eli received a call from his mother. I listened as his jaw tightened, his voice clipped. "Yes, Mom. I did it deliberately. No, I won't apologize. She's my daughter. If you can't treat her equally, then maybe we won't be back next Christmas." I froze. I had dreamed of him saying those words for years, but hearing them spoken aloud filled me with both relief and dread. Relief because finally someone had drawn a line. Dread because I knew Deborah would not take rejection quietly. Within days, the whispers began. His sister Melissa called me, voice dripping with false sympathy. "It was dramatic, don't you think, Eli, showing everyone up like that? You know Mom just forgot by accident, right? You didn't have to humiliate her." I clenched the phone until my knuckles whitened. "An accident doesn't happen 11 years in a row," I said, my voice low. "She forgot, Lena, every single Christmas, every birthday, every family dinner. That's not an accident, that's a choice." Melissa sputtered but didn't argue further. She knew I was right. But the Morgans had built their entire world on pretense, on keeping the facade of perfection intact, no matter who had to be sacrificed in the process. For years I had played along, not anymore. That week, Lena started talking about the northern lights constantly. She checked out books from the library, drew pictures of snowy mountains with green skies, and told anyone who would listen about her trip. "Daddy's taking me to Iceland," she said proudly to her teacher. "We're going to drink hot cocoa and watch the sky dance." Her pride was contagious. For the first time, she didn't feel less than her cousins. She had something they didn't, an adventure, a dream, a memory waiting to happen. But Deborah's shadow still loomed. At dinner one night, Lena asked softly, "Do you think Grandma will be mad at me because Daddy gave me the best gift?" The question sliced me open. I took her hand, steadying my voice. "Sweetheart, Grandma's feelings are her own. They don't belong to you. You didn't do anything wrong. You deserve every bit of joy you feel." She nodded, but I saw her shoulders tense. Children always carry what adults refuse to. A week later, Deborah called me directly. Her tone was sharp, her words dripping with disdain. "I don't appreciate the spectacle Eli made. You humiliated me in front of the entire family." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone. "You humiliated yourself the moment you let every other child open gifts and left my daughter empty-handed." "You're overreacting," she snapped. "She's a child, she'll forget." "No," I whispered, my voice breaking. "She'll never forget, and neither will I." There was silence on the other end, then the cold click of the line disconnecting. I stared at the phone, my hands trembling. For the first time, I hadn't backed down, and I knew it had cost me whatever fragile peace existed between us. Christmas break passed, and soon it was time. Eli packed their bags carefully, thermal coats, boots, mittens, everything Lena would need. She bounced around the house, excitement radiating off her in waves. When they left for the airport, she hugged me tightly. "I'll take a picture of the lights for you, Mommy," she whispered. I kissed her forehead. "I'll be waiting." That night, Eli sent me a photo, Lena standing in the snow, her eyes wide as streaks of green and purple lit up the sky above her. She was grinning so wide her cheeks were red, her mittened hands raised toward the heavens. The joy on her face was so pure it brought me to tears. For the first time, she wasn't the forgotten child in the corner of a lavish living room. She was the center of the universe, bathed in the glow of a miracle sky. But life has a way of testing even the brightest moments. When they returned, Deborah announced a family meeting. Against my better judgment, we went. I told myself maybe, just maybe, she had realized the cruelty of her actions. Instead, she sat at the head of the dining room table, flanked by her husband and Melissa, her lips pressed into a thin smile. "Eli," she began, "I think it's time we talk about consequences. You embarrassed me in front of everyone, and now people are whispering. Do you know how that affects our reputation?" Eli's jaw tightened. "The only reputation that matters is what Lena carries in her heart. And she knows she matters. That's all I care about." Deborah's smile vanished. "If you can't respect tradition, maybe you don't belong at this table anymore." The words landed like a knife. For a moment, silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Then Eli pushed back his chair. "Then maybe we don't." He reached for Lena's hand, and together we walked out of the house. Outside, the cold air bit at my cheeks, but I felt strangely free. For the first time in over a decade, I realized we weren't bound to Deborah's approval. We didn't need to sit at her table, beg for scraps of affection, or endure the humiliation of being outsiders in a family that never wanted us. We had our own table, our own family, our own love. That night, Lena climbed into bed beside me, holding her bunny close. "Mommy," she whispered, "are we still a family if Grandma doesn't want us?" Tears burned my eyes, but I smiled. "Sweetheart, family isn't about who wants to claim you. It's about who shows up for you. And will always show up for each other." Her smile was small, but it was real. And for the first time, I believed it too. The weeks after that family meeting felt like walking through a storm. Deborah's silence was louder than any argument, stretching across phone lines and holiday cards that never arrived. Eli and I both knew it wasn't just silence, it was punishment. A reminder that in her world, love was conditional and belonging could be taken away as easily as a wrapped gift under her perfect Christmas tree. But inside our little home, something shifted. Without the constant weight of her judgment, I felt lighter. I began to notice Lena's laughter, more often the way she sang to herself as she brushed her doll's hair, the joy she carried when she told her classmates about Iceland. She still spoke about her grandmother, sometimes cautiously, as though testing whether the name itself would break me. But slowly she stopped asking why she'd been forgotten that night. Eli, on the other hand, was restless. He had spent his life smoothing over conflicts, playing the role of mediator between his mother's demands and everyone else's discomfort. Now he was done. And without that role to play, he seemed unsure who he was supposed to be. One night, as we cleaned the kitchen after dinner, he leaned against the counter, staring into his glass of water. "Do you think I did the right thing?" I froze, a dish towel in my hand. "You gave our daughter the only gift that mattered. You stood up for her. Of course you did the right thing." He shook his head slowly. "I don't mean the trip. I mean walking away from them. From her. From everything." I reached for his hand. "Eli, your mother has been walking away from us for years. You just finally turned your back, too." He didn't answer, but the crease in his brow deepened. Spring came, and with it, birthdays. When Lena's birthday arrived in March, we threw her a party at the community center. Streamers, balloons, cupcakes, simple but filled with joy. Her friends laughed and played, and for once I didn't glance at the door expecting Deborah's dramatic entrance. But halfway through the party, as Lena was unwrapping a board game from one of her friends, the door opened. Deborah walked in, carrying a gift bag with gold tissue paper sticking out. Conversations hushed, eyes darted toward me, then to Eli. Lena froze, holding the box in her lap, uncertain. Deborah smiled tightly and said, "Happy birthday, darling." Eli stiffened. I felt my throat constrict. But Lena, sweet Lena, put the board game aside and ran into her grandmother's arms. She wanted love so desperately that she leapt into the arms of the one who had denied it. Deborah handed her the bag. Inside was a designer doll, still sealed in plastic, with hair that looked nothing like Lena's and a dress that glittered unnaturally. "I saw it and thought of you," Deborah said. Lena smiled politely, but her eyes flickered toward me. She was learning to accept gifts with gratitude, but also to notice when they didn't come from the heart. When Deborah turned to me, her smile thinned. "We can't erase the past," she said quietly, "but perhaps we can move forward." Her words felt rehearsed, as though she were reading lines from a script she hadn't written. I nodded, but inside I knew moving forward with her always meant pretending the past hadn't happened. Over the next few months, Deborah began reaching out more. An occasional phone call to Eli, an invitation to Sunday brunch, a card addressed to Lena in perfectly neat handwriting. On the surface it seemed like progress, but beneath it I sensed the same performance as always. Lena noticed too. One afternoon, after hanging up the phone with Deborah, she asked me, "Mommy, how come Grandma always talks about what my cousins are doing, but never asks me about school?" I swallowed hard. "Because sometimes people don't know how to love the right way." "Does that mean she doesn't love me?" Her question shattered me. I pulled her into my lap, pressing my cheek against her hair. "It means she doesn't know how to show it. But that's not your fault. And you don't have to earn anyone's love, Lena. Not hers, not mine, not Daddy's. You already have it." She nodded slowly, her small arms wrapping around me, but I felt the doubt linger in her little body. Then summer arrived, bringing another Morgan family gathering, this time a wedding. Melissa's oldest daughter was getting married, and the entire family was invited. Eli hesitated, unsure whether to attend, but Lena begged, "Please, Daddy, I want to wear my new dress. Maybe Grandma will notice me this time." The hope in her eyes broke me. Against my instincts we went. The wedding was lavish, held in a sprawling vineyard with crystal chandeliers strung between oak trees. Everyone was dressed to the nines, champagne glasses clinking as laughter carried through the night. Deborah glided through the crowd, her silver gown shimmering, her smile wide. When she saw Lena, she crouched down, kissed her cheek, and exclaimed, "My beautiful granddaughter," loud enough for everyone to hear. Cameras flashed, relatives nodded approvingly. But later, when Lena tried to tell her about Iceland, about seeing the northern lights, Deborah waved her off. "Yes, yes, darling, but look at your cousin's college plans. Isn't that exciting?" Lena's smile dimmed, her shoulders slumping. I wanted to storm out, but Eli caught my arm. "Not here," he whispered. So we stayed. We endured. And as I watched my daughter fade into the background, once again my heart hardened. That night back at home, Lena climbed into bed silently. After a long pause, she asked Mommy, "Why does Grandma only love me when people are watching?" Tears filled my eyes, but I forced my voice steady. "Because some people care more about appearances than hearts. But you, my love, are worth so much more than that." She nodded, but her eyes glistened with tears she didn't want to shed. I sat beside her long after she fell asleep, staring at her little hand curled around the blanket. I thought of all the times I had bitten my tongue, smiled through pain, kept the peace. And I knew I couldn't keep asking my daughter to survive the way I had. Something had to change. The breaking point came in autumn at Thanksgiving. Once again, gifts for the children appeared at the Morgan table, small trinkets, little treasures. Once again, Lena's name was missing. She sat frozen, her fork still, her lips pressed tight. I waited for Eli to stand, for him to fight again, but he stayed seated, his shoulders heavy. And in that moment I realized it was my turn. I pushed back my chair, the sound echoing across the table. "Enough," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "This ends tonight." Every head turned. Deborah raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said, my chest tight, my hands trembling. "You've excluded my daughter for years. You've treated her like she doesn't exist, like she doesn't deserve the same love as the others. And I've stayed quiet because I didn't want to ruin your perfect dinners. But no more. She will not grow up believing she is less than anyone in this room." Silence filled the dining room. My heart pounded, but I didn't sit down. I looked at Lena, who was staring at me with wide eyes, and I realized she had been waiting for this moment all along. Deborah's lips pressed into a thin line. "If you can't respect this family—" "No," I cut in, my voice rising. "Respect isn't earned by hurting children. Respect isn't earned by cruelty. If this is what family means to you, then maybe we don't need to be part of it." The words hung in the air like thunder. And for the first time, I didn't care if the sky fell. The silence after my outburst was deafening. Forks hovered midair. Eyes darted nervously between Deborah and me, and Lena sat frozen, her cheeks flushed. My words still echoed in my chest, a mixture of fear and liberation. For 11 years I had swallowed my pain, but now it was out there, burning in the middle of the Morgan dining room like a flame no one could smother. Deborah leaned back in her chair, her expression cold and measured. "You always did like to play the victim," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to stay steady. "This isn't about me. It's about a 9-year-old girl who deserved to feel loved tonight, just like every other child at this table." Melissa shifted uncomfortably, looking down at her plate. Walter cleared his throat as though he might intervene, but one sharp glance from Deborah silenced him. Eli finally spoke. "Mom, you've crossed the line." His voice was low, but it carried weight. "I've defended you, excused you, forgiven you more times than I can count, but I won't stand by while you treat Lena like she's invisible." For the first time that night, I saw Deborah falter. Her lips parted slightly, her mask cracking. But then she recovered, her chin lifting in defiance. "Families have traditions. Not everyone needs to be included in every single one." I laughed bitterly. "Tradition is not an excuse for cruelty." Lena's small hand slipped into mine under the table, trembling but firm. She whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Thank you, Mommy." The tears I had been holding back spilled over, and in that moment I knew there was no going back. The drive home was quiet. Lena had fallen asleep in the back seat, clutching her bunny, her head resting against the window. Eli kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Finally he spoke. "I should have done that years ago." I turned to him, startled. "You defended us tonight." He shook his head. "I let it go on too long. I thought if I kept the peace, if I just endured it, things would change. But all I did was let her hurt you and Lena over and over." His voice cracked, raw with regret. "I'm sorry." I reached over, placing my hand on his. "We both stayed quiet for too long. But tonight we chose differently. That's what matters now." The next few weeks were tense. Deborah didn't call. Melissa sent a single text. "You could have handled that better." Walter stayed silent. The Morgan family, who had always prided themselves on appearances, now had cracks running through every surface. But in our home, something beautiful bloomed. Lena stood taller. She laughed louder. She began to speak about herself with a kind of pride I hadn't heard before. At school, she gave a presentation about her Iceland trip, holding up photos of the northern lights as her classmates leaned forward in awe. Her teacher told me afterward, she was glowing with confidence, like she knew she belonged in the spotlight. That night I cried in the kitchen, not from sadness but from relief. For the first time, I felt like I had given my daughter something stronger than gifts. I had given her the truth that she mattered, that she was worth defending, that her voice deserved to be heard. But Deborah wasn't finished. It was mid-December when she finally called. Her voice was as sharp as ever. "I hear you've been telling people I exclude your daughter. Do you know what that does to my reputation?" I laughed bitterly. "Your reputation? That's what you're worried about." She snapped, "Don't you dare mock me. I built this family. I made sure everyone had a place. Everyone but Lena," I said flatly. "She doesn't need a place in a house that treats her like she doesn't exist." There was silence, then a hiss. "If you walk away from this family, don't expect to come back." My voice trembled, but I held firm. "We're not the ones walking away. You pushed us out the moment you decided my daughter wasn't worthy of your love." I hung up before she could reply, my heart pounding in my ears. Christmas Eve arrived again 1 year later. This time we didn't drive to the Morgan estate with its glittering chandeliers and hollow laughter. We stayed home, just us. I decorated the tree with ornaments. Lena picked herself snowflakes, tiny owls, a glass globe filled with silver glitter. We baked cookies together, dusting the counters with flour, and when Eli walked in, Lena ran to him with chocolate on her nose. The laughter that filled our small living room was warmer, louder, more real than all the Morgans' polished parties combined. And then Eli surprised us both. He pulled out another envelope, handed it to Lena, and grinned. Her eyes lit up. "Another trip?" He nodded. "This time Norway. More northern lights, dog sledding, and hot springs." She squealed with joy, throwing herself into his arms. I watched them, my heart swelling, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel bitterness about what we'd lost. Because we hadn't lost anything. We had gained something priceless. We had chosen our own tradition, love without conditions, but even as joy filled our home, I felt the weight of the scars Deborah had left. One night, as I tucked Lena into bed, she looked at me seriously and asked, "Mommy, do you think Grandma will ever love me like she loves the others?" I hesitated, then brushed her curls from her forehead. "Sweetheart, sometimes people don't know how to love the way we need. But that doesn't mean you're unlovable. You are more loved than you'll ever know." Her eyes softened and she hugged me tightly. "I love you, Mommy." I whispered back, "I love you more." And in that moment, I realized the betrayal and cruelty had given me something unexpected. It had forced me to find courage I didn't know I had. It had given Lena a father who would fight for her in front of everyone. And it had given us a family defined not by tradition but by choice. The Morgans never apologized. They never admitted their cruelty, never acknowledged the pain they caused. And maybe they never will. But it doesn't matter anymore. Because we've built something stronger, something they can't take away with silence or exclusion. This is the truth I hold on to. Family isn't about the gifts under the tree or the names called out during Christmas dinner. Family is about who sees you, who chooses you, who shows up when it matters. And when my daughter looks back on these years, she won't remember being left out of Deborah's perfect parties. She'll remember the northern lights. She'll remember laughter in our kitchen. She'll remember the night her mother stood up and said, "Enough." The second Christmas without the Morgans was nothing like the first. That year, our little house felt alive in a way I didn't know was possible. Lena hung her handmade paper stars from every window. Eli strung twinkling lights across the porch, refusing to stop until they glowed bright enough to rival the entire street. We didn't have a banquet table or expensive wines, but we had laughter echoing off the walls and the smell of gingerbread filling every corner. For once, I wasn't holding my breath. I wasn't preparing for subtle jabs or watching Lena's face tighten when her name wasn't called. There were no tense silences to smooth over, no masks to wear. It was just us, whole, complete enough. On Christmas Eve, as we sat curled together on the couch watching the snow fall outside, Lena whispered, "This is the best Christmas ever." I kissed the top of her head, tears pricking my eyes. "It's the best because we made it ours." But the past doesn't disappear just because you stop walking into it. The Morgans still cast long shadows. Occasionally, Melissa would call with clipped words about family obligations, and sometimes Walter sent generic holiday cards with his name scrawled at the bottom. Deborah remained silent. Her absence was loud, deliberate, and final. At first, I thought it would crush me. I thought Lena would crumble without her grandmother's approval. But instead, we grew stronger. Every time Deborah didn't show up, we showed up for each other. Every time silence rang from her end, we filled it with laughter and love. Still, there were nights when I lay awake thinking about how close I came to letting that cycle continue. I thought of all the years I smiled politely while Deborah erased my daughter piece by piece. The thought filled me with guilt. Why had it taken me so long to fight? One night I whispered that question aloud to Eli as we lay in the dark. He pulled me close and said, "Because you wanted peace. Because you thought protecting Lena meant absorbing the pain yourself. But you fought when it mattered most. And that's what she'll remember." His words settled into me like a balm. Months passed and Lena blossomed. She joined the school choir, started writing short stories, and filled her room with maps of places she dreamed of visiting. Every so often she would ask when we'd see the northern lights again, her eyes shining with wonder. Eli promised we'd go again someday, and I believed him. Then one night Lena crawled into bed with me after a nightmare. She clutched her bunny and whispered, "I dreamed Grandma told me I didn't belong in the family." I stroked her hair, my heart aching. "Do you know what I told her?" I asked softly. She shook her head. "I told her she was wrong. Because family isn't about who tries to keep you out. It's about who holds you close and never lets go. And you, my love, belong more than anyone I've ever known." Her breathing steadied, and soon she drifted back to sleep, safe in the cocoon of my arms. But I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, promising myself I'd never let her question her worth again. The years ahead weren't perfect. There were moments of doubt, hard days, and the sting of being outsiders in a family that once claimed us. But slowly we built new traditions. Each Christmas Eve, Eli gave Lena an envelope, not always for an extravagant trip, sometimes just for something small like a promise of a camping trip under the stars, or tickets to her favorite play. It wasn't about the gift itself. It was about reminding her year after year that she was seen, chosen, and loved without conditions. By the time Lena turned 12, our home was covered in photos, her with the northern lights behind her singing on stage at the school concert, her smiling in front of a tent pitched in our backyard. These were the memories that defined her childhood, not the empty space under Deborah's tree. And when people asked why we no longer went to the Morgan house, I stopped making excuses. I told the truth, because my daughter deserves better than being forgotten. Some nodded in sympathy, others judged in silence, but I no longer cared. One evening, years later, Lena sat at the kitchen table doing homework. She paused, looking up at me with those same wide, thoughtful eyes she'd had since she was little. "Mommy," she asked, "do you ever regret walking away from Grandma's house?" The question caught me off guard. I sat down across from her, searching her face. "Do you—" She thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No. I just wondered if you missed it." I smiled sadly. "Sometimes I miss the idea of what family should be, but I don't miss the way they made us feel. And I'd choose you over tradition every single time." Her lips curved into a soft smile. "Me too." It was in that moment I realized the cycle was broken. The silence, the exclusion, the generational cruelty had ended with us. Looking back now, I see the betrayal for what it was, a wound carved by people too blind to see the damage they caused. But I also see the unexpected gift hidden in the pain. It forced us to create something real, something lasting. Yes, the Morgans gave every child a gift except mine. But that cruel act revealed the truth: they never held the power to define her worth. We did. And in choosing to stand, to fight, to walk away, we gave Lena the greatest gift of all: the knowledge that she was never invisible, never forgotten, never less than. And in the end, that truth mattered more than any envelope, any trip, any glittering tree. It mattered because it was ours. If my story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories like this. And most importantly, leave a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell me when you chose love over tradition. Because your voice matters too.